Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Jeff Poole.
And I'm Joe Lalo.
And we've got a cool guest for you this week, Lafferty. If you've been paying attention to podcasts at all, you've probably chanced across her before. She's been doing it for quite a while. She's also an author from Durham, North Carolina, and she made her name with podcasting. As I said, I Should Be Writing, the Angry Robot podcast, Escape Pod, which is a premier sci-fi podcast magazine. And she has written for magazines, role-playing games, and audio and video podcasts. She is the author of I Should Be Writing, the science fiction novel Six Wakes, The Shambling Guides, and recently the solo Star Wars movie adaptation. She's been a finalist for the Hugo, Nebula, and Philip K. Dick Awards, and she's won the John W. Campbell Award for Best New Writer. Hello, Mer. Did I screw anything up that you would like to correct before we start asking you questions?
I actually won the Hugo this year for Best Fan Cast, so that was exciting for my other podcast, Ditch Diggers, that I do with Matt Wallace.
All right, very cool. And well, I guess why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into writing and podcasting?
Well, you said it so much better than I did. It's so much more exciting. It's always so much more exciting hearing someone else say it, because it's like, wow, did I really do all that stuff? It's been a busy 14 years. I got started in 2004, a couple of months after podcasting was invented, because it sounded like a neat thing to do, and that was pretty much it. It just sounded like a neat idea, and I was excited about the whole subscription aspect of it, so I started doing shows, and when I got bored, I'd do another show, and did a lot of projects and fiction and audio dramas, and somewhere along the way, I built my audience, and I didn't actually expect to do that, just talking about wanting to be a writer. Actually helped build my audience because my listeners started rooting for me. And, when I started self-publishing via podcast, they became interested in my stuff, which helped me, made me more of an attractive prospect for my publisher in 2011. And then I started publishing with Orbit. My first book came out in 2013. So that's kind of been my path. Was actually talking to a friend of mine today about how we miss the punk days, about how now that I'm traditionally podcast, I don't do the wacky, or traditionally published, I don't do all the wacky podcast projects, that anything that just leaps to mind like I did, 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah, I actually remember you from early days, because I was a podcast listener kind of before there were apps for it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was only a handful of them out there, and you had to really want to listen to those podcasts.
Yeah,
you had to find the MP3s and play them on your iPod or whatever. How did that, you self-published first, and then that led to a traditional publishing deal? Was that in your intent all along? Or
No. I was actually afraid of publishing via podcast because I thought it would mess up my rights, that it would be considered a reprint once I released it via audio. But as we now know, if you have a self-published book that gets enough attention, publishers will buy it. And my first book, I did some novellas that have still only been released via podcast. I self-published them later, but it was kind of funny because I had a bunch of agents tell me that they were convinced that it would sell because they were really popular novellas, and they've never been able to sell them. But anyway, then I did an agent hunt for my novel and couldn't land an agent, so I decided to self-publish via podcast my first book called Playing for Keeps back in 2007, and that got interest from a small press. And so knowing that it had already been out via podcast and people were interested in a paper copy got that interest. And so kept making a name for myself in podcasting and really networking, because I was interviewing a lot of podcasters, or a lot of writers on my podcast, which, just these days you have to have a little bit more than just an awesome book. If you do have an awesome book, you might land a deal, but if you have an awesome book and a couple of other things, social media aspect, podcast listeners, whatever, it's going to make things a little bit easier.
Yeah, I've definitely heard from agents that they and the publishers will scope you out and see if you already have a platform established, and like, yay if you do. Like, maybe it's not a deal killer if you don't, but it does seem like a real big plus for them to know you're already willing to market yourself.
Yeah.
Well, which podcasts are you doing right now? Because I think people might want to check them out if they're not already listening.
Sure. I Should Be Writing, which is for the more for the wannabe. I discuss a lot of things pertinent to writers, but mostly what I talk about are the emotional hurdles that we put in front of ourselves, all the things that stops us from working on projects when nobody else has stopped us, but people will think I'm not good enough. I have a fear of failure. I have a fear of success, whatever. And so it's really just telling people, just forget about it and just write the book. And then I have with my co-host Ditch Diggers, which is a podcast about the business of writing, where we talk about agents and publishers and contracts and what happens when your agent dumps you and what happens when your publisher dumps you, and things like that. And that is more for the working writer who needs an outlet for that kind of information. Perhaps they don't have an agent, or they don't feel that they can ask their agent these questions, this kind of stuff. And then I'm the co-editor of Escape Pod, which is the science fiction podcast magazine. So we do one free short story a week.
Cool. Now, it seems like a lot, maybe not most, but a lot of the most successful podcasters have multiple podcasts. And I think Kevin Smith has 5. Is this a function of like narrow niche equals loyal audience?
I have no idea. I really think it's more of, it's an addiction. It's I want to talk about this thing into a microphone. And then you talk about that thing for a little while and you think, I want to talk about this other thing. Does that fit my current podcast? I'll just start another one. I've done this many times over the years, many times. And I mean, it's one thing that's great about it. It's you can find that niche, and if you want to talk about something that doesn't fill it, well, then just start something else. Put it on the same RSS feed. Put it on a different one. You've got so many options, and all that it costs is, after you buy, a microphone, all it costs is your time.
Yeah, that's something that I think that a lot of people like. There's a lot more overlap with podcasts and self-publishing than I didn't really think about it too much until recently. But like, so many people talk to me and they're like, you self-publish? I'd like to write a book. I'm like, good, just write a book.
Yeah, do it.
It's the same thing with podcasting. Like, your phone is surprisingly, it can get you started. So it's sort of amazing to me that more people haven't done it. I mean, a lot of people are doing it, but it's surprising that more people haven't done it. And it's just, I don't know, an excellent outlet.
Yeah, it is. It's really funny. I'm about to shake my cane at the clouds. And back in my day, there was no iPhone. So the ease of recording audio and video everything was a lot more complicated. But last year I do a yearly video podcast with my daughter on for Advent. And last year we realized that I have a nice camera, but the iPhone was so much easier to work with, and the video was just fine.
The most useful tool is always the one you have with you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I was actually curious about your writing style. Like, when you're working on a book, do you actually follow outlines? And if so, how far out do you have it plotted?
I hate outlines. I hate them. I understand people's brains work in different ways, and I understand that it's the outlines have a great purpose. And really, after you sell a book and prove to a publisher that you can start a book and finish a book and edit a book and put it out, then you can sell your next book on an outline, because they say you don't want to spend all that time writing a book on spec that we may not want. So they say, just make an outline. And I'm the kind of person that I can tell you a basic plot, but I'm not going to come up with anything really good until I start writing. This metaphor just came to mind, so I apologize if it's clunky. It's like, I can tell you I have a book about a young boy who finds out he's a wizard and then goes to school, but I'm not going to tell you about Hogwarts or Hagrid's personality or the history of Voldemort until I start writing, because that's just not going to come up in my head. It's just not going to be there. And so I despise outlines because I don't get those wonderful little details that make books stand out from other books until I get down and dirty with it. So it's frustrating that I'm actually in a good point of my career right now where outlines would benefit me, but I'm still very bad at them.
Have you ever written yourself into a corner?
Yes, and actually an outline helped there. I wrote one of my novellas, I kind of wrote until I didn't know what to write then. And then I outlined the book starting with the first part of the book that was already written, and then was able to figure out roughly what the next step was. And then I could write myself out of it. So I'm actually, I guess I could say I much prefer outlining after I've written about half the book, which doesn't really come up very often. Nobody wants that. So I've only used it successfully that one time, but it was actually quite useful that I did have an outline. I was able to create an outline from what I already had to help get me out of that spot.
And when you're writing, do you have to lock yourself in a room, get rid of all distractions, and just everything be quiet, or can you actually have the internet turned on, like a radio going, or some noise in the background, kids, whatever? Me, I need a quiet room, almost not a darn peep can be heard except for just me doing it, or else I'm easily distracted.
I'm very easily distracted. I'm the kind of person that, okay, I'll turn off the Wi-Fi, but then my phone will buzz. Okay, I'll put my phone in another room. Well, I've got an Apple Watch, so my Apple Watch buzzes, and I might as well just turn off the whole, just destroy everything and burn it down. But really, I can write when I need to. If I really need to, I can write anywhere with any distraction. Sometimes, I'll want to be with my family, so I'll sit in the TV room while they're watching something and write. But ideally, I prefer movie soundtracks and the internet turned off. I have an app called Forest that's quite good. Have you guys ever used that? It's like the Pomodoro method, where what you do is you tell the app, okay, start the clock, and if you do anything with your phone, then it says a tree has been planted, and then if you do anything with your phone, the tree dies. And then you have to restart. And so after a couple of these, you look and you see if you have a forest or if you have a whole bunch of dead trees lined up, and it is strangely useful.
For Apple's iOS, it's called Forest?
Yes, it's on iOS. It's on, I think you can get a Chrome extension. I'm not quite sure how effective that is, because if you have to use your browser, then you're clearly using your browser. And anyway, I know it's got a couple of different ways you can use it, but it's a fun little way of forcing yourself to keep away from your phone unless you want to have this little dead tree showing you your failure. But yeah, it's ideally, I work from home alone, so I don't have the distraction of other people around me. So I've got that, but it's really the internet, because I can put on a soundtrack and focus for a good amount of time and get stuff done. But yes, I am easily distracted.
I think that would disturb me if I felt like I was slaying trees.
But see, you don't have to slay the trees. You just do the work.
All right. Well, I'll see if I can find the link to that and put it in the show notes for folks who want to check it out. You mentioned earlier your Ditch Diggers podcast, which I hadn't known about that one. I knew about some of the older ones. And we actually had a question from Twitter that I thought I'd ask, because it was in referring to that.
Excellent.
This is from Vale, and he asks, do you ever upset agents, editors, or other authors because of the frank and honest approach Ditch Diggers takes when talking about the industry? He loves the gritty, working trad writer approach, but wonders if you upset those who want the magic to be real.
We have never had any complaints from agents or editors. We've had nothing but good comments from agents and editors. Both of our agents love the show and recommend it to other clients. it was something that not a lot of people were talking about. It's like the whole mystery of who's getting what advance. It's just no one knows. And now there's stuff going on, and there are people who have dealt with things that are, whatever NDA they'd signed is over with, or the legal proceedings are over with, and they were free to talk about what happened, and they were open to do it. So we've had, Cameron Hurley and Chuck Wendig on talking about some bad publisher experiences in their past. And we've got something interesting planned for shortly in the future. It's not scheduled yet, so I don't want to say, but I'm excited to be talking to an author, frankly, about something bad, because people don't know. Once you sell your book, it's so exciting and you think you're there, and then your agent quits, and then your editor quits and orphans you, or your editor quits and doesn't orphan you, but your publisher stops caring about your book, and you're sitting there going, wait a minute, I've arrived. I got here, I got the advance, I'm getting published. Why does this suck? And that's why Matt and I are there to talk about the realities of sometimes what the reality of publishing. And if people are upset about the magic being gone, and I don't think it would be publishers and agents that would be upset about the magic. It would be more beginning writers upset about the magic being showing the man behind the curtain, as it were. If they're upset about that, then they're not ready to publish, because you need to know what could happen. And so that's why we're trying to do the frank and honest thing. And we don't make anybody talk about stuff they're not ready to talk about, or stuff that they are legally obligated to not talk about. But we have talked about some frank stuff.
Yeah, I checked one out last night where you guys were talking about, I don't know, it's all about the money or something was the name of it. And, just talking about what author advances are, and how when I was first looking for a traditional publisher, and I found the average advance for sci-fi or fantasy novel was like $5,000. I was like, what? I thought it was going to be like $100,000. Are you kidding me? So it sounds like a great service that you're putting out there for anybody that wants to get into traditional publishing, especially.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun with it.
And you've dabbled with Patreon too, it looks like. Is that more for your podcasting or for your writing, or for both?
Well, unfortunately, Patreon doesn't give you an option for that. So I've got different levels. If somebody wants to support my writing and I can send them writing, then I'll send people stuff at certain levels. But if you support my Patreon, you are helping me with both my podcast and my fiction. But I also put some of that money towards Matt, because I would not have Ditch Diggers without Matt. I've been enjoying doing solo podcasting for a long time, but there is just as you guys know, there's something very different having the dynamic of a conversation going on. And so I'm very grateful to him. So I pay him some of the Patreon money, and I wish we could do something a little bit more like the Kickstarter crowdfunding method of, I'm going to fund this project, but there's not really an option for that. So if you support my Patreon, you support me as a creator, and Matt gets some of it.
Have you ever thought about doing one for the podcast and then a different one that's just for you and your writing, or would that just be too much work?
Well, they didn't really have that option. It's like you, the creator, you make a Patreon account, you yourself. And I don't know if that's changed or whatever, but it's just the option wasn't there. You don't do a Patreon for a project. You do it for the creator. I actually haven't looked at it to see if that's possible. Maybe I should. I don't know. But of course, the problem there is I've had people who supported me on PayPal before there were crowdfunding, and then I asked them to go to Patreon, and now there have been people who've supported me for years on Patreon. And do I want to try to ask them to switch platforms again? Because there's always going to be some, what's the word? drop off. There's a better word for it, but it's whenever everybody leaves and you ask them all to come back, they may not. Some people may forget that they're giving me $5 a month and be like, oh, right. No, I'm not going on. And then there's, and sure, that's fine. But there are several people on crowdfunding who are just kind of there because of inertia, which is, frankly great. But, if you ask them to assess what you're giving and maybe follow me to a different platform, you're going to lose some people.
Absolutely. Now, there's a lot of different
attrition. Sorry.
There's a lot of different ways that people use Patreon. Some people just basically use it like a tip jar. Like if you feel like supporting us, just put money here. We're not going to do anything extra. That's just a way to say, to support us. Others use it as a paywall to sort of deliver goods to people that you can't get unless you're a patron. Where do you balance the rewarding patrons with the not alienating non-patrons?
I do. The biggest thing you can get for the least amount of money is if you support me at any level, you get all of the archives of I Should Be Writing. There are over 400 episodes. They're not all on the RSS feed. So I make that available to Patreon supporters. They get early podcasts if I can. I put them up for Patreon one day and then it goes up on the site the next day. And then when it gets into higher levels, I offer more stuff, but I've discovered that most people just want to support. And I love that. I feel a little guilty. I had one option of sort of mentoring people. I would meet with them, face to face over Skype and just talk to them about their work. I wouldn't critique it, but I would talk about what they're working on, etc. And almost nobody at that level was taking advantage of it. And so I phased it out and told anybody that if anybody who would still support it at that level, I would still be their mentor if they wanted me to. But it's like there's that mental weight of I must deliver this thing every month. And then even if people don't take advantage of it, it's still there in my head that I have to do it. So it was a relief to take that out, and I didn't lose anybody. So I think it's an interesting thing that you have to be careful of, because sometimes you might promise too much and other times, you may not promise enough. I have a friend who's got a $1 level to support her. And if they don't want to do the $1 level, they can support at the $2 level and they'll get twice as much as the $1 people are getting, which is nothing. And she makes more money than I do on Patreon.
It's the tip jar method.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to go somewhere else with that. Sorry.
You branched off of some people aren't offering enough.
Yeah. I think one thing my patrons have just had a large uptick because I'm promising a daily NaNoWriMo podcast just for patrons. So they're going to, they're not big podcasts, but they're going to be one every day going, come on, little camper, atta girl, you can do it. And a little bit more creative than that, I will admit. But that's something that people are really excited about. And they're supporting it lots of different levels where you can get it at the $1 level. So it's interesting to see what people expect out of Patreon. One person actually told me that he wanted to support at a higher dollar amount, but he didn't have the option to do so. So I made the unicorn dollar amount just for him and said, you get everything that they get at this level, but you want to give me more money. So cool. And he supported at that level. And I'm incredibly grateful. But it's weird that people will want to support you. And I try to, deliver as much as I can because of that. It just in the basic things that I do, the podcasts.
All right. And along those same lines, I've always wondered for those people who create the Patreon accounts, have you ever felt obligated to offer more and more and more for their paying guests? I mean, as you're starting to touch on, how easy is it to overextend yourself and become overwhelmed by obligations and rewards?
The only obligation I have felt is my own. like I said, there have been people who have been not expecting things. I promised one thing at a level, and I haven't been able to, because of time and obligations this year, haven't been able to deliver as much as I wanted to, and no one has complained. And anybody who's dropped down, they usually email me and say, sorry, my financial situation has changed. Not, you're not delivering this crap, so screw you. I mean, no, I'm not getting any sort of sense of people expecting things. There are, I realized that there was one level where people get like a signed book from me, and I hadn't like touched base with those people in months. And so I emailed them and I'm like, hey guys, this is what I have to offer. I'll be happy to send you a copy. Just let me know, because I haven't done so. And like a small percentage of those people asked for the item. Somebody supports me at the level where I'll Tuckerize you. I will put your name or a name that you prefer in the book that I'm working on. And the one person that supports at that level is like, maybe an ex-boyfriend you can kill. And I'm like, I'm not comfortable with that. And so he's like, maybe not then. So it was, I more find that at least for my personal opinion, people are not taking advantage of all the things that I'm offering. I'm more feeling guilty for not offering the things that I have promised.
One more Patreon question from me before we move on is just, do you have any tips for authors out there who are hoping to, add that as an income stream, especially maybe as a way not to rely on Amazon so much anymore, or if you're traditionally published and only getting paid twice a year, a monthly paycheck can be really great.
I think the biggest thing that people want, and again, remember, I'm a podcaster, so I'm communicating with my listeners is the biggest thing that I do. People want to hear from you. They would love to hear personally from you. N.K. Jemisin has a level where she sends you pictures of cats. And it's the most important thing is you need a platform already. Don't use crowdfunding to build a platform, because there are very few people out there, except for your friends and your parents, who are going to throw money at a complete unknown. And that sucks. You've got the whole problem of, well, how do I get my foot in the door if I can't get my foot in the door? And you just have to hustle like the rest of us did. The thing I feel bad about is people ask me how to build an audience with podcasting, and I'm like, go back to 2005. And do it the way I did it, because I have no idea how to tell people how to enter the world of podcasting or podcasting fiction these days, because things have changed so much. But back to Patreon, it's communication, I think, is what people want more than anything. They want the communication, and they want to hear that they're helping you. So I think those are two big things.
It's definitely tough to get rolling if you don't have that fan base already. I often see traditional publishers doing great in there because they may only write one book a year. And so here, if they're offering short stories or bonus scenes more often, it's like super exciting. Yeah. Whereas, I don't know, a really prolific indie author who's publishing a book every month might not have that degree of eagerness because they're not so hungry for something new. I don't know.
That's a good point. You mean scarcity?
Yeah. Do you feel as a podcaster that it's easier? Because I kind of look at all the people I support, and it's usually people who are putting stuff out for free on YouTube or podcasts, and I like get something out of it, so I want to give them my money. Mm-hmm. Whereas with authors, I'm like, well, I'm already buying your book. So I do support a couple authors, but I wonder if it's just more challenging if you're... I don't know if you've ever thought about it.
I hadn't thought about it that way. That's a good point, because you are supporting the authors via buying the book. I think one of the biggest thing about funding online these days is just flat out honesty. People think that authors are millionaires, and you hear you're a millionaire, but then you hear, no, my advance was $10,000. I made $3,000, and that's before paying my agent and taxes. And then I'll get another $3,000 in, say, 8 months when I turn the book in. And then I'll get another $3,000 when it's published several months after that. And then I won't get anything for a long time after that. And people don't quite get that. And they think, if like again, citing N.K. Jemisin, she said, I'm a teacher. I could focus more on fiction if I had regular income. And she's writing amazing award-winning stuff that people just can't get enough of. So people were clamoring to give her money so that she could have a monthly income to quit her job so she could focus more on fiction. It's all about the honesty, really. You just need to be honest with people and say, here's what I need and why I need it. And if people feel like they're supporting you, they feel closer and more connected to you. And I think that helps too. So it's just that personal touch.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just being transparent with folks. And even if somebody's making a lot of money, it doesn't mean, like, I think I do somebody who makes 20,000 per video or something, but the videos are great and I love them, so I'm still going to support.
Yeah.
As long, and because they're letting they're not acting like I'm going to be broke this month if if you don't bump up to the $5 level, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to ask the question that everybody's curious about. How did you get invited to write solo in the Star Wars universe?
Wow. Well, I got my foot in the door when my agent got me a job writing a short story for Star Wars Insider a couple of years ago. This is why agents are good, because they know publishers. And so my agent knows the publisher at Del Rey who's in charge of Star Wars. And she was talking about me and talking me up, and I got an opportunity to write a short story. So I wrote a short story that they liked. And then time passed, and then they did the project I can never remember whether it's different or certain, from a certain point of view, which was the anthology that Del Rey put out last year for the 40th anniversary of Star Wars, where 40 authors wrote short stories about every scene in Star Wars and some extra scenes that people imagined from points of view that were not the main characters. So you've got like some of the best ones are the guy Vader force chokes but doesn't kill. Well, you've got his employee complaint write-up of that time. You've got a story from the point of view of the monster in the garbage compactor. I wrote about Greedo's murder from the point of view of the band in sort of a VH1 behind the music kind of way. And so I was invited to do that, and that was a fantastic experience. Just being able to, it was like writing fanfic and getting paid for it, except I wasn't paid for it because it was a charity thing. But I mean, Star Wars is one of the few things that you can say I didn't get paid for, but it was just fine. And so, at that point, the editor knew me, liked me, knew that I could write something that she liked, knew that I could turn it in on time. And then I got the call in January asking if I wanted to do the solo novelization. And, of course, as Ghostbusters says, if someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes. So, of course, I said yes. So it was a fantastic experience. It was a lot of work in a short amount of time, but it was awesome.
Now I'm thinking back to earlier when you said you don't like outlines, but I imagine they sent you the screenplay and it was really strict what you could write, or how did it work?
No, that's very different because, the main plot's already written, and no, they do not send that script out. I mean, I found out the actors and crew themselves had locked e-readers that only had what they needed to see. I had to fly out to Lucasfilm, and I had a day with the script to make as many notes as I could, and then I left the script there and came home. I had like all the companion books as they were coming out, heavily watermarked with my name. So if they'd gotten out, everyone would know who released it. And I had the middle grade book, which was complete, to help me with some of the more finer details. And one of the biggest things about writing a novelization is I used to think the word was they let you write extra scenes, like it was a treat, but no, that's required. That's one thing about the novelization is you add to the story. They just, the publisher and Lucasfilm have to approve everything you write, of course, but it's still canon. So I had to send them, this didn't feel like an outline because it was a rough thing of, like, I want to expand this scene. I want to expand the scene with L3 starting the robot revolution. I want to give Val a scene that tells more about who she is and what her life has been. And then I said I wanted to tell the story. I wanted to start the story about 15 minutes before the movie, which starts with Han running away from a deal gone bad. I wanted to tell the story of the deal. And I ended it with no spoilers, but at the end of the movie, Han gives a character something, and I wanted to tell the next step of what happens to that something that character had. And that was the thing I really did not expect them to go for, because I thought I was just asking for the moon, and they gave it to me. So if you've seen Solo and you know what happens at the end, I tell the story of where that stuff goes and who it's delivered to. And that was possibly the biggest thrill. So it wasn't as stressful as outlining, because the outline was already there in the screenplay. So I was more saying, this thing about this character that we already know the story of, and everybody agrees what the character's like. I want to expand this or tell this. And, they edited a couple of things, and they only cut one thing, which is there's a character who really who's kind of an aspect of fear, Enfys Nest, early on, and she doesn't really become a character with a personality until late in the movie. And I said I wanted to do some of her past, and Lucasfilm cut that scene, saying not that it was bad or they didn't like it, but that it was not something they were ready to write yet. That was not a part of the universe they wanted developed yet. And so that's really the only thing they didn't want, aside from, little bitty things here and there. But it was an awesome experience. And luckily they were late approving all of my extra scenes, so I got an extension. So I actually got to see the movie right before I turned it in. So I was able to make little detailed checks here and there, which, it didn't require a lot of rewrites, but it really helped me visualize a couple of the things that were still a little nebulous in my head.
That's great. I think it would be really hard, at least for me, to try to do that without the movie or even the script. But it's cool that it sounds like you had a lot more leeway than I would have expected. Having read those before, movie adaptations, I just always assumed the extra stuff was like things that were in the script but had to be cut for time or something. So
sometimes it is. I got one of the last iterations of the script, but someone was telling me that there's a scene early on with Han and Kira running away from the gang that they're sort of conscripted to, and they run through a fish market and hide in a barrel of eels. And someone told me, that scene's being cut from the movie. Will you, keep it in the adaptation? And I said, sure. So there are a couple of those. There's a scene. Yeah, there's maybe two of those that were originally in the script that I just that I kept in the book. But most of the extra stuff I wrote myself.
That's excellent. First off, I got to congratulate you, because now you have added to Star Wars canon, which is
a
pretty impressive thing. But
how cool is that?
That's awesome. That's like a bucket list thing that people might forget to add to their bucket list because of the unlikelihood. But also,
if I can interrupt, I'm sorry. Sure. My agent was asking me today, this year. She's like, "I want you to think about your goals," and I'm like, "Well, I guess my goals would be get a book published and get a Star Wars book, and Well, I just did that, so
And
it's kind of hard to think about where to go after this. I'm sorry to interrupt, but yeah,
that's right.
It was so buckety. I didn't even know it was on my bucket list until it happened.
Now, like you mentioned that you'd written some stuff for Star Wars, but like this is a specific thing where you're working with other people's characters and other people's story. Had you ever had any experience working in other people's setting like that, or was this your first? Okay.
No, I started out writing role-playing games, and that's writing in a setting that other people have created using large characters, not large, but I mean important NPCs that are going to feature in the world, and a lot of in-game rules to follow. So I think that was one of the best ways to get introduced to work for hire work, because you don't have that feeling of, oh, these are my babies, you can't change them, because when you start with role-playing, they're going to do whatever they want to with it. It's work for hire. You're going to get a flat rate, and, you know, you have to learn to write the stuff and let it go. And learning that early made it a lot easier, and to know what was expected of me. So, yeah, it was, I felt perfectly comfortable doing that.
All right. First off, congrats for adding to the Star Wars canon universe. That's freaking awesome there. But okay, so my question would be with regards to that is, since Star Wars fans can be very vocal and critical, were you ever concerned about negative feedback coming from those diehards who are either like don't like your explanations or thought you got certain things wrong?
Or don't like the fact that I'm a woman?
That too, yes.
Yeah, actually, I was terrified. I really was, seeing what happened to Kelly Marie Tran, the crap that Chuck Wendig has gotten for daring to put people of different races or different sexualities in his books. I pretty much locked down my social media. I am definitely not a victim blamer, but sometimes when you hear that celebrities get kicked, are chased away from social media because they were getting death threats in their direct messages, and I'm like, why did the general public have access to their direct messages? You lock that down. So
you can leave comments and make sure make posts and make sure all the comments are disabled. So
exactly,
you don't worry about someone contacting you.
Exactly. So I did all of that. I followed a couple of block lists. I made all of, I don't only see comments for people who follow me. Let's see, DMs have been closed since the beginning of Twitter. I can't even imagine anybody having that open. And I don't know, but the funny thing is that I still haven't seen a lot of negative stuff. It's been weird. And I told my editor this, and she, being the editor in Star Wars, is well aware of all of the crap that flows around when the fanboys don't like the Star Wars. And I said, I don't know if it's because I've locked down social media or if people just aren't complaining. And she's like, no, reviews are pretty good. My daughter said that the only bad review she's seen is that I was not allowed to fix the one thing they didn't like about the movie. And I'm like, well, yeah, I was not able to, quote unquote, fix anything that the movie may or may not have gotten wrong. That was not in the contract. So, I was afraid, frankly. Yes, I was, but I think I took the precautions I needed, and the people who the few, I also don't seek out reviews, but when I looked at something on Goodreads and saw the number of stars it got on like the first day, I was sad, and my husband he looked at it and he's like, yeah, those are people who didn't like the movie in the first place, and so they just wanted to say bad things about the book. So, I mean, stuff like that's going to happen, and you just got to remember that it's not personal. Even if they want to make it personal, it's not really personal.
It seems like, at least with basing it off a movie, you might be a little safer, assuming the movie didn't do horrible things.
Yeah.
And if you did your own story. I still remember like 20 years ago, Ari Salvatore wrote one where he killed Chewbacca and like the horrible stuff that was online. It was, back before they rebooted everything. But, that would be tough to deal with.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to do that. No.
Well, last question on this for anybody who might be thinking, wow, I really want to try to get involved in writing in someone else's universe. Since you talk about the money sometimes, can you say if it's like comparable to one of your original stories, or do you like get paid less because it's the honor of writing in somebody's universe, or is it even something somebody should aspire to do if they're a newer author?
It's hard to do it as a newer author because they're going to want more than regular publishers. They're going to want proof that you can write a book and finish a book, and they're going to want proof that you are passionate about what you're writing about. And I get, they want people to vouch for you. So it's you have to do your time, doing lots of work. As for the advance, it was not mind-blowing, but it was more than I'd gotten as an advance before, if that helps. So that was good. But yeah, it was more, but not mind-blowing more.
Yeah, I feel like I've just heard from a number of authors that were like, in the 90s, you used to be able to kill it with like movie tie-in stuff and that kind of thing, and that things have kind of gone downhill from there. So I was just curious.
Yeah, I don't know. This is the only one that I've had experience with. So, yeah.
All right. Well, we are kind of a marketing show, so I suppose we should ask a few questions on that.
Sure.
How much do you do of your own, and how much does your publisher do when it comes to marketing?
Well, it depends on what. I now have a couple of publishers, so they did a lot of marketing for Solo. I had a book trailer, but I really think that the publishers rely on you, especially if you have a large social media or podcasting or blogging audience, for you to do a lot of the work, spread a lot of the word, because that's going to be their core audience. I don't know. I think I would have liked to have more advertising, but it's hard because they want to spend the money on the advertising they know for the books that are already gonna do well, which sort of feels like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Also, why do they keep advertising Coke? But I still feel like talking online, being vocal on Twitter, which is very hard these days because of mental health issues and the fact that the world's on fire, and connecting with your audience any way you can is going to be your best move. I've never been on a book tour. I did go to New York Comic Con to do a couple of autograph sessions and a couple of Star Wars panels, which was awesome, by the way. Hearing the good and bad things about Solo as the movie came out, and then as the book came out, and finally I got to actually meet hardcore fans who loved the movie or loved the book or didn't love the movie but heard good things about the book and read the book and then liked the story better. I mean, it was just a fantastic experience. But I hope that me being there and talking to people, and some people just wanted a free poster, so I talked to them, I signed the poster, and hopefully that made them either buy the book or get the book out of the library, or put a plan to buy the paperback or something. But I think that this is connected in my brain. It sounds like I'm going off on a tangent, but I believe that going to conventions is extremely important. I think, and I know there's a lot of people who don't have either geographic ability or monetary ability to go to a lot of conventions, but if you can, then it is incredibly useful to just meet readers. And if you're earlier in your career, you can also meet agents and editors and talk to people about what they're looking for and what they're publishing. And just if you're not a jerk, then you will stand out and be memorable. And, that can get people remembering you and thinking, hey, I'll check out your book. And some people just buy your book, as you said, because they want to support you, and they may not even know if they'll like it or not. And then they'll read it. I'll get these surprise things like, I saw you at a con and you sounded interesting, so I bought your book. And then I read it and really liked it. And I'm like, I'll overlook your surprise and just say thank you. But, I think that's one of the biggest things is, for me at least, is going to conventions and meeting readers and, meeting other professionals. Because, in my podcast, I asked authors for advice to new writers. And one of the best things I heard was from James Maxey, which is just be nice. Be nice to everybody, because you have no idea who you meet at a convention who could be your editor in 3 years, or become a bookseller, or suddenly decide to open an agency and do very well for themselves. And this isn't like kissing butt and sucking up to people. It's just being a pleasant person and someone memorable. And when you're doing that in public at conventions and become, people like convention organizers and other people who attend that they can count on and enjoy talking to, then I think that's also a really good piece of marketing.
I have heard there's a great speech that Conan O'Brien gave when he finished the Tonight Show, talking about how the most important thing you can do is just be kind. And so I think it's definitely good advice there. Yeah. You talked a little bit about this earlier, how like you're sort of bummed out that you can't do more wacky published to podcast type stuff now that you're traditionally published. Are there any other ways that you feel like traditional publishing hampers you, or do you think that's offset by the benefits?
Well, to be honest, I don't believe traditional publishing is hampering me. I believe it's all the obstacles are in my own brain. It's more of, I could do this cool thing, or and maybe make some side money getting Patreon interested, or I could sell a book to my publisher and get a guaranteed advance. And that's my own kind of roadblock, where I don't think that wacky alternative stuff is quote unquote worth it anymore. And I say that in quotes because creatively appealing to audiences, all of that makes it worth it. It's just hard to remind my brain that makes it worth it. As for other ways traditional publishing hampers me, I don't think so. Not really. I haven't had a lot of issues with anything coming up that my publisher has told me, you can't do this thing that is not connected in any way, shape, or form to us. So I don't know if I'm not pushing the envelope enough, or if things are actually okay in that aspect.
So, okay, let me ask you, do you participate in any social networks? I mean, are there any you prefer or avoid over the others?
I've been comfortable with Twitter since 2007 when it launched. I think Facebook is a tool of pure evil, and every time something else comes out about Facebook, it proves me right. That camera that follows your face and everyone's talking, it's like the commercial's so awesome. It's like, oh, look, I can move around the room and the camera follows me. Yay, Facebook. I'm like, that is awful. That's hell. This is not good, people. This is terrible, terrible things. So no, Facebook is the devil, and I hate it. Other things like the more photo-focused ones, Instagram, Pinterest, is one of those things that I think I would like to use, but I never do. It's more of an abstract thing. I never think, I'm going to take a picture of this and put it on Instagram. I just don't think of it. And the same with Tumblr. I think Tumblr's a fun, unique. It's different from all the others, and yet I also don't think of posting there. It's weird that these technologies are so young, and yet I feel old and set in my ways. That if I think I'm going to post something online, it's always Twitter. And now it's like Twitter is doing their own things that are not good, and it's hard for me to support that, but still that's where I think to go.
Twitter's kind of my favorite little spot too. And I just don't look at the main feed because you're right. There's so much stuff going on.
Yeah.
I'm like, I only look at the like direct messages, and if people at me, I'll check that out. I have to admit, Facebook was one I had to be dragged kicking and screaming on, but it does sell the most books for me out of all the things I've tried. And, I'll use the affiliate links so I can actually see on Amazon, like, oh, hey, I actually sold a whole bunch when I announced the release there. So,
oh, that's cool.
It's evil, but everybody's there. So there you go. I wanted to comment on your earlier thing about being nice. It's a good reminder to everyone out there that it's actually a really small industry, whether you're traditional published or self-published, like everybody talks to each other, and they chat up at the con. So I've certainly heard of people that have kind of managed to blacklist themselves just by being obnoxious online or at a convention.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I've heard my agent say, somebody was really rude to a friend of mine, and then they queried me. It's like, do they think we don't talk to each other? It's, the agents talk to each other. The editor, I see the editors at cons. They're all really good friends. They all give each other standing ovations when one of them wins a Hugo, and the rest of them have been nominated and they lost a Hugo, but they're just like, yay, yay, our friend won a Hugo. I mean, it's a tight community. So yeah, you don't want to do that. Be nice.
I'm curious because you've won a number of awards and been nominated too for a number of big ones. Have you found that helps at all with the marketing and maybe with book sales?
Well, with marketing, I was able to put Hugo and Nebula nominated on the cover of my book. And by I mean my publisher was able to. So I've got a little star on the cover of Six Wakes that says Hugo and Nebula nominated. And I can definitely tell you that book sales were up for the past 6 months. And the book came out in January of last year. So once the award nominations came out, the book sales definitely went up. And I talked about it a lot. So I guess, yeah, when you get nominated and other people are talking about your stuff and you're talking about the fact that you got nominated, that itself is marketing. So yeah, it helps. I just saw my sales for the first 6 months and they were way up. So that was cool.
On the subject of awards, like how do awards happen? Is it the sort of thing that is it just quality and exposure, or do you have to like campaign for them, like for your consideration with the Emmys?
It's tough. I don't know. I think the thing that's safe to do is just to tell people what you have that's eligible. There's some people who still think that's tacky, but I don't think it's tacky just to say, here's what I created last year. And I guess that's for your consideration. But I honestly didn't expect Six Wakes to get as many award nominations as it did, and I was just baffled with each one. And I heard people talk about it last year that they were going to be putting it on their list, which still, again, baffled me. I didn't understand. But so other people were talking about it, but once I realized that it was something people were actually considering, I did say this is eligible. And where Matt and I are able to use our podcast for marketing, and since we were hoping for the fan cast, which is the newest Hugo, so not a lot of people vote for it, especially the old guard, reminding people in our podcast that if you are a Hugo voter, we are eligible for Fancast, I'm certain helped out. And of course I would say, just fill out your ballot. If you want to vote for us, cool. Matt's like, no, we want your vote. So I think we balanced each other well there. But yeah, it's just a matter of telling people what's eligible. But I have a friend who she won Best Graphic Story several years ago. I want to say 2012, 13, something like that. And it was something that she didn't even think would be eligible. She didn't tell people was eligible. And it got nominated, and she got just baffled and actually thought it was a joke. And then she won. So, sometimes it can happen without any effort, but it feels like if it's eligible, why not make a slight effort, at least to say, here's what I worked on last year.
Very true. Okay, so let me ask you, are there any awards or accomplishments that you have your eyes set on that you're currently trying to get?
Well, I never expected I would write Hugo attention-getting fiction, and was, like I said, completely baffled that Six Wakes got a nomination. And I did win for Fancast, but winning a Hugo for one of the fiction categories is definitely bucket list. It's huge. It would just make my life. It would be amazing. Anything beyond that is also amazing. But the Hugo's the one that, I learned about when I was a kid. So of course that became the thing to get. And, but Hugo or the Nebula would be phenomenal. I was starting to read Ursula K. Le Guin nonfiction lately on her views on science fiction and writing and women and gender and stuff. And it's like her brilliance just terrifies me, because I have that feeling of, well, look at what she accomplished. I'll never accomplish something like that because she's so much smarter, or she was so much smarter than I'll ever be. But, I could try. So, if I could have a sliver of what she accomplished, that'd be cool.
And with regards to podcasting, have you any plans on creating or joining any new ones?
Oh gosh. No plans on creating any new ones. There is, when I was talking about my punk years and my wanting to do crazy stuff, I was thinking of, there was a plot that I wanted to turn into sort of a video interactive fiction game. And then I just thought, or I could write it as a novel, and it didn't sell. And then I thought, well, I could just turn it into a video podcast or an audio podcast. So I'm kind of toying with a weird fiction thing right now, but I have no idea what direction it's going to go in. So that's about the only thing that I've been considering launching something new.
All right. Well, thank you for answering the questions about awards, because I'm always curious about that. It seems like if you write the kind of stuff that gets awards, you're not going to be a big seller because it's not mainstream and doesn't have the appeal. Yeah. So I always wonder, like, can you marry the two? I figure I don't write the kind of stuff that wins awards, but my first thought was, like, if I did, I would totally use that in the BookBub submission. You can put comments down there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, this was a Nebula nominated something, and I would be really curious if you were more likely to get a deal, because they do seem to like it if you can say, like, I was a New York Times bestseller or something like that.
Oh, yeah. You use that. It's a it's a gold star to put beside your name, and you should not be humble about it. It's even though the book didn't win anything last year, it was nominated for 5 awards, and yeah, I'll milk that as long as I can.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you should be able to use it for the marketing and to help sell books. It seems like, why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. All right. Well, we've been chatting for an hour, so I'm going to wrap up here with a couple questions that came in from Twitter.
Okay.
Vale, who asked the earlier question about your ditch diggers, he says, as you've become an A-lister, I've always wondered if you're considering doing a new cover style relaunch for your Afterlife series. And he asked if those are the ones that were self-published.
Oh, wow. First, I giggle about being an A-lister. Okay. But no, I have not considered doing anything. And actually, to go into Ditch Digger land, I have a very sour taste in my mouth about the Afterlife books. It's a sad thing, but I wrote them and I podcasted them, and they were a huge, huge favorite of all of my listeners. And they're the ones that multiple agents said, we can sell this. And I don't mean a whole bunch of agents came to me at once. I mean, over a series of years, I had agents approach me and say, we want to sell this. And I rewrote the first 2 novellas as one novel so many times. And it was probably only 3 or 4 times, but still, this is like after the book's been finished. Like I finished it. And so I'd already been through writing it and editing it. And then I had to edit it like 3 or 4 more times. And I was done. I've got that feeling of I can't even remember what the original, like little details about the original stories that may have been lost or put back in or taken out or put back in. And if ever anybody looked into my backlist, Dan Brown style, and said, we really want to publish this, I would probably hire someone that I really trusted to edit it for me, because I don't know if I could touch it again. New covers? I hadn't really thought about it. I like my covers. They're simple, but, I like the art that I got. I would like it if someone were interested in it, but I would also like it if somebody else could clean it up, because I'm so done with it. I actually had an agent say, would you be interested in doing this again? I said, no. And she's like, give it a try. And I did. And she's like, wow, you really don't want to do this book, do you? I'm like, what did I tell you? I told you. It's the passion's gone. I have no idea where to take the story after editing it so many times. Somebody asked me to turn it into YA, so I made them younger and took out the sex. And then, no, YA didn't work. Let's make them adults again. And so I made them older and put back in the sex. And it was just, it was so painful having so many people say, oh, we're certain this can sell. And they were so wrong, even though it made it made a good amount on Kickstarter back in 2011. This is before any of the instant $1 million Kickstarter things. But, so yeah, it sounds like a good idea, but I'm so done with the book. I don't know if I could.
I imagine it would be very difficult to go back and edit something old. I have a hard time even writing a story for something like I finished 5 years ago, because I would have to reread the whole series at that point because I don't remember what was going on. So,
my God, I have to tell you a bit of advice about what to deliver during crowdfunding. When I did the crowdfund for the Heaven series, I said, if somebody donates at the $1,000 level, if somebody buys the $1,000 level, I'll write another novella in the series. Thinking no one would ever do that, especially because the series pretty much ends at 5 books. I'm certainly not going to spoil it for you, but it was like, in Misery, when he kills Misery and then Annie Wilkes says, no, you have to bring her back. And he's like, but I can't take this story anywhere else. And one of those, I don't know where to take it. And then someone supported at the $1,000 level. And I'm like, well, crap, what am I going to do now? And it took me a couple of years to write that, just because I did not expect it. And it was tough for me to figure out where to take it.
Moral of the story, watch what you say. Is that it?
I know. If you're going to promise something, even at a really high level, be prepared to deliver.
Maybe safer just offering to name a character after those folks.
Exactly.
All right, our last question is from Will. He'd love to hear your thoughts on how fiction authors could use podcasting for marketing or just for fun.
I would say it is people love to meet and hear from their heroes. This is why, all of these people, all these celebrities have huge followers on Twitter. Everyone wants to hear. Like Justin Bieber says hello and he gets 7,000 likes in an hour because he just said good morning. People love to hear that kind of thing. And so if you do a podcast either about you or about something you care about or about something within your book, your fans are going to be interested. They're just going to want to hear from you. If you are not well known as a fiction author and you want to connect with people about something that either you personally are passionate about or something that you're passionate about that's connected to your books, and use that as a marketing tool. But don't just come out as, hello, I'm author and this is my book and I'm going to tell you about it for the next 30 minutes and then the next 7 podcasts after that, and you're going to listen. It's going to be awesome. People don't want that. So, give them you as much as you want to give. Wow, that sounded a lot better in my head. Sorry. It's always have the wall up to protect yourself and your privacy, but sharing yourself as much as you're comfortable with your listeners or readers or audience will always get people closer to you and make them more passionate about you and your work.
Very good advice. And do you think for podcasting, would somebody do better podcasting some of their fiction or doing like a fan cast kind of thing? Any thoughts on that?
That's the tough thing, because I did it back in the day of shaking your cane at the clouds, or I'm shaking my cane at the clouds now because of doing it back in the day. I don't know what a good move is these days. I can tell you that some authors are doing extra content, like extra novellas or extra short stories in the worlds that they publish via Patreon or podcast. And some just like to talk. And so I don't know what works best. But I think if you've got a good fan base for your work and you want to do little vignettes or deleted scenes or whatever, then, give it a try. Why not? What are you going to lose?
All right. Well, thank you for talking to us for over an hour today.
Oh, sure. It was fun. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to plug your stuff? Are you working on anything new you want to mention before we go?
I can't mention anything I'm working on yet. It's killing me. My most recent thing is the solo novelization. That's Solo, a Star Wars story novelization, where you'll get a lot of extra content than over just the movie. Before that, I have 6 Wakes, which is Hugo and Nebula nominated science fiction murder mystery in space. I have a nonfiction book called I Should Be Writing that's based on my podcast by the same name. And I do another podcast, Ditch Diggers, which we talked about earlier. It's about the business of writing. And then I co-edit Escape Pod. I'm a freelancer. I wear a lot of hats, and I will always forget one of the hats that I wear. It's a sad thing. But I'm at merverse.com, where I usually try to keep up with all the stuff I'm working on. So if I didn't mention it, it's probably there.
All right, great. I will put the links in the show notes, episode 205 here, so that people can find anything we talked about, including the Forest app that
the Forest app, yes,
that he snagged the link to.
I found the link to it. I was looking at it, going, not bad. I might have to try this. See how many trees I can kill.
That's right.
Yeah. Jeff would be like, "Yeah, more trees died. I'm doing it right."
Hey, look, they introduced a new species. Let's see how fast I can kill that one. So, oh well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Mur, and looking forward to checking out more of the Ditch Diggers podcast. I'm particularly interested in that one. So,
I think I'm going to have to go download the solo novel there. So it sounds good.
Thank you. I hope both of those things happen. But thank you, guys. It's been fun.
All right. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thank you for listening, everyone.
So long, everybody.